Bienvenidos a todos. My name is Marlene Linares Gonzalez. I am the Communication and Outreach Coordinator at the Latin American and Iberian Institute here at the University of New Mexico. The LAII, as we call it at UNM, promotes and supports interdisciplinary teaching, research, and meaningful public engagement to advance the protection and dissemination of knowledge about Latin America and Iberia. Latin America is designated as one of 7 priority areas of research for UNM, and we proudly contribute to both the university's intellectual community as well as the global discourse through public programming. We'd like to take a moment to recognize the traditional homelands of the Pueblo Sandia on which UNM sits. The original people of New Mexico, Pueblo, Navajo, and Apache have deep connections to the land and have made significant contributions to the broader community statewide. We honor the land itself and those who remain stewards of this land throughout the generations, and also acknowledge our committed relationship to Indigenous peoples. And now I will pass it along to Dr. Francisco Galalte, Assistant Professor of American Studies and Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at the University of New Mexico, in addition to the Director of the Feminist Research Institute here at UNM, who will introduce today's panel and speakers. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's so wonderful to see such a good crowd on a Friday. A good Friday also for those who are, practicing Catholics, or, have remnants of Catholicism, or, understand or think about this day. Thanks nonetheless for being here and to talk about trans politics in the Américas, no less. So I think that's the best way to spend a day like Good Friday, is talking about trans politics. I'm also the director of the Feminist Research Institute at the University of New Mexico, and I'm honored to have that position in that capacity. The FRI is the new home for Transgender Studies Quarterly. So this is hopefully the first of many events related to the journal and what we're trying to do at TSQ. So this particular event is to relaunch the Trans en las Américas issue, which came out in 2019. So it's taken about 2 years for all of these translations from English to Spanish to be put out into the world. And so I'm going to finish up these comments, and I'm going to introduce the co-editors that could be here today from the volume, and have them talk a little bit about their vision and the importance of translation for this particular issue. And so we'll do that. I have some questions for them, but I'm sure that everyone else might have some questions. I know quite a few of the authors are here, so those of you who are in the issue, I invite you also to give some comments about your essays if you are so inclined. And so just very quickly, I'm going to go ahead and drop the URL for all of the essays into the chat. The essays will live at Transgender Studies Quarterly's kind of complementary website. So this is our non-peer-reviewed kind of state of the field space where we actively are looking to publish different takes on what's happening in trans studies, conversations that happen a little bit quicker than we are able to get going in the journal, given how long it takes for an essay to enter our system and then end up printed and around in the world. So TSQ now is that forum that we are hoping to provide a place for conversations in trans studies to happen, and then also of course for translation like this. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly to bring up that. And so on this page, you can see we have the cover art, and all of the essays are here, and they will be here and are available for download as well in full PDF form. So they appear full text. And for those of you who might want to assign this to your students, you can definitely go down to the very end, and you will be able to download a PDF of every single essay. So initially there was funding to publish just a few of the English, and I decided it would probably be best if we made everything available to everyone. And so I worked with Cole and others to round up some volunteer translators who I'm very thankful for. to get everything translated. So I don't want to be the one that's taking it most of the time, because I really want the editors to be able to speak about this process for them and the importance of this issue. It's a meaningful issue to me. Also, it was the first issue that I, shepherded and was there to help when I became one of the general editors for TSQ. And I'm so proud of the work that went into this and just kind of the impact that it's had out in the world. And so I want to thank all of the co-editors, everyone, all the authors, everyone that's here. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce you all to our editors, our co-editors. So let me get out of here. Okay, so I'm just going in order in terms of the order on the journal as it appears. So the first person I'd like to introduce is Claudia Sofia Garriga Lopez, who is an assistant professor of queer and trans Latinx studies in the Department of Multicultural and Gender Studies of California State University, Chico. She is an interdisciplinary scholar activist with a PhD in American Studies from the Department of Social and Cultural Analysis of New York University. She is the author of Trans Feminist Crossroads, Reimagining the Ecuadorian State, published in TSQ, Transgender Studies Quarterly in 2016. Her scholarly work is grounded in a critical engagement with activism, public policy, and public health, as well as trans feminist and queer performance art and cultural production in Latin America, the Caribbean, and within people of color communities in the US. The next editor is Cole Rizky. And Rizky is a Latin Americanist and transgender studies scholar whose research examines the entanglements of transgender cultural production and activisms with histories of state violence and terror throughout the Americas. Rizky's current book project provincializes US-centric histories of state violence, state formation and identity, politics that continue to underwrite the field of transgender studies. He's the co-editor of Trans Studies in Las Americas, the special issue that we're talking about here today, and is the translation section editor as one of our reoccurring sections in the journal in TSQ. Rizky's article, Familiar Grammars of Loss and Belonging, Curating Trans Kinship in Post-Dictatorship Argentina, was recently shortlisted for the International Association of Visual Culture and the Journal of Visual Culture Early Career Researcher Essay Prize. His work appears in journals such as TSQ, GLQ, Journal of Visual Culture, and Radical History Review. And then of course we have Juana Maria Rodriguez, who's a professor of ethnic studies, gender and women's studies and performance studies at UC Berkeley. In addition to serving as a co-editor of this special issue, Trans Studies in Las Americas, she is the author of 2 books, Queer Latinidad, Identity Practices, Discursive Spaces, and Sexual Futures, Gestures, and Other Latina Longings, which won the Alan Bray Memorial Book Prize at the Modern Language Association and was a Lambda Literary Foundation finalist for LGBT studies. She's currently completing a book on visual culture and Latina sexual labor entitled Puta Life, Seeing Latinas Working Sex, and this is under contract with Duke University Press. So please everyone join me in welcoming our co-editors. We didn't talk about order, so I think whoever would like to give some comments or remarks about the issue can go ahead and go.
Hey everyone, I just have a brief thank you to some additional folks just to kick us off. So yes, deep gratitude to Francisco Galarte for organizing this event, University of New Mexico's Latin American Iberian Institute for hosting us today, Claudia Sofia Garriga Lopez, Juana Maria Rodriguez, and Danielson Lopez, who could not be here with us today, and also our translators. And I see a number of you here today, which I'm excited to hear more from you, and thank you for all your work. I just wanted to say we're celebrating the full translation of peer-reviewed special issue of TSQ, titled Translations in Las Americas, originally published in 2019 with Duke Press. It's always been our collective goal as a guest editorial team to make the issue open access, fully available in Spanish and free of paywalls, so that anyone can read and download the special issues articles. I just want to begin by thanking our translators, as well as some of our funders who partially funded the initial translation work. I see Ian, are you here? Ian Russell? I thought I saw you. Okay, well, sorry. I want to thank, so Ian Russell, Bridget Walters, and Olga Anaya Zuravleva's work made the original 2019 print publication of this issue possible by translating a number of the issue's original Spanish language submissions into English. Following the English language issues publication, La Cooperativa Brújulas members Saliani Rivera Velasquez and Luca Marialta translated 3 of our English language submissions into Spanish, including my introduction, Sai Citlali Delgado Huitron's piece, and Dora Silva Santana's work. And I want to give a huge shout out and my deepest gratitude to my doctoral students at the University of Virginia in the Department of Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, who are here and are also taking my Translating in las Américas graduate seminar. Manuel Acevedo Reyes, Winnie Perez Martinez, Daniel Doncel, and Yafreini Familia were really crucial in the final stretch and brought all of the remaining translations to fruition. So I'd like to honor their labor. Manuel, Dani, Winnie, and Yafreini translated all of the material in the arts and culture section, the book review section, and in particular, Manuel translated 2 full-length articles, including Francisco Alarte's general editor's introduction and Malu Machuca Rosa's piece. So their labor brought things to a conclusion. So big thank you, deep gratitude to my graduate students for helping out, unpaid labor of love. Thank you so much. I'll invite you all to share remarks after we've had our conversations as well about the translation process. I'd love to hear how that was for you all. And then just thank you to our, yes, sorry.
Cole, really quickly. I also want to add a thanks to Tanya Valderas, our editorial assistant at TSQ, who did some line editing on some of the essays as well. So shout out to Tanya too.
Awesome, Tanya is here. Thank you, Tanya. Yes, that was coming next, just to say that Francisco Alarte and Tanya also Valderes really copy edited the entire volume, moved all of the translations onto TSQ Now. Frank, Tanya, I know that you did all the formatting work, the web design, brought this issue to a digital platform. So huge thank you to both of you. Neither this event nor these digital open access articles would exist without all of that labor to bring this issue together. And preliminary funding for translations into English and the print volume that also funded La Cooperativa Brújulas translations, which was coordinated by Claudia Sofia Garriga Lopez, was provided by the Othering and Belonging Institute at the University of California, Berkeley, which Juana Maria Rodriguez coordinated, and the Transgender Studies Research Cluster at the University of Arizona, which Claudia Sofia coordinated. So thanks everyone for your labor and to everyone that's here today. That's all I want to say, just an extra additional thanks to everyone for being here and for all of your work.
Go ahead, Claudia.
I mean, I think a deep thanks to Cole Risky is in order for his deep labor of love in all this process from beginning to end. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be with you all today. And thank you, Cole, for such careful and comprehensive thanks to everyone, because it really was such a collective effort. And it really was something that, you know, when we were envisioning the project, we wanted all the translations, including in Portuguese, to come out all at once. But we've been learning, you know, the process of doing those things is much slower. And so it feels like a wonderful kind of coming to fruition to be able to meet with you all today. So thank you.
Yay. I guess I just want to, you know, the work of this, you know, when we put this together, we received, and I know that in his introduction, Cole sort of gives some numbers, but we were receiving submissions in Spanish and Portuguese and English. We had to find peer reviewers that had some kind of expertise in the countries that were being referenced in relation to trans studies, that had the language skills. Yeah, maybe like don't try this at home, but absolutely try this at home. We would have meetings.
Juana Maria did warn us that her internet connection is a little unstable today. So sorry to lose her. But yes, it was
Teams across
difficult.
like, no, just to again, the peer reviewers that are also were part of this, which really just made the volume possible. It was a peer reviewed essay. You know, these was a peer reviewed volume. So just to throw that other little bit to thank our peer reviewers.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. And again, many thanks to everyone involved. And so I wonder at this point, if any of our translators kind of want to chime in and talk about how things were for them. I know that thinking about our authors too, we have of course our authors are bilingual, right? And so that process of presumably writing in English for a journal that publishing in Duke, right? I know like for Laura and Sai, like you all both are English or Spanish speakers, Portuguese as well, right? So writing from there and then in English and then seeing it translated again itself is an interesting process of the translation, right? Like all different, so many transings happening here. So, I don't know if our translators kind of want to talk about their experience or authors kind of want to talk about their essays and their impact, or where do we go from here in terms of trans scholarship in Las Americas. This is already, it's just 2 years old, the volume, but there's so much more work that's I'm seeing kind of being produced out in the world as a result of this issue, I think. So I'd like to open it up if folks want to talk about, their experience. And yeah, Dora, would you like to comment on your piece?
Sure. I think everyone, I'm really bad at names, and so this is a strategy of being able to, give love to everyone and gratitude, and at the same time that I save myself from forgetting people's names. But thank you for this whole process. So I. For the back and forth, and I think especially everyone, but it's like Claudia reaching out and like Dora, like, because can we come back to this? And for me, that part of the emotional process to revisiting a text that is already published, and you're like, yay, and then you have to come back to it and other feelings come again with the text that you have to read, because writing is also this emotional aspect to that. So I really think, for the amazing work and to be able to have access to people, to have access to the discussion. So one thing with the translation that was interesting to me is how to think of gendered language associated with also the political historical necessity of gendering, especially acknowledged feminists, and in the way that I was marking most of the sections on my text, right? So in English, have mais viva, right? In the I is acknowledging, the foregrounding the ways that travestis, trans women, trans femmes have used the I as a way to fight against the negation and the masculinization, and also of our experience of our being in the world, which is through language, but it's also compounded to very material violence, and that comes through the linguistic and symbolic one. So for me, there was this back and forth in being vigilant about every time, for example, the title was reassemblando, it was like lo trans, right? And for me, that I understand the linguistic aspect of it, but for me, it was like being centered on Black, travestis from Brazil. That is it's violent to us to be associated to low, right? Like to a masculine assignment in language. Even I understand. So for me, it was interesting to see how sound and how the repetition, the just grammaticality, but at the same time that it was some effect associated to that, and those experiences of everyday embodiment of negation through language. And how Lotras, for me, it did something that it was not just linguistic, right? It did something that it was also a negation through that aspect. So I was like, can we have, how could we make this Latrans instead? And the people that were translating, I really want to thank you for saying about la experiencia trans. I was like, okay, so that's, an aspect that that brings that almost poetic, because I'm really interested in poetic. So for me, the sound in that sense of the la trans, la travesti, that gives that aspect of transness that for me was important in the text before the X in different parts of the text, so that we understand that it's not just the binary, but that was important for me to have that back and forth, and people are very generous and very also engaged. And so I just really appreciate that. Thank you.
Winnie, Danny, Yafraini, Manuel, you all are here too. If you all would like to share something, please feel free. These are my graduate students at the University of Virginia. First year graduate students, I should say. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for making me part of this amazing project. I appreciate the opportunity of working alongside you, my colleagues at UVA, and the extraordinary team of interdisciplinary and international scholars, artists, and activists who made this issue, translation, and launch possible. It was an honor for me to translate Lin-Manuel Ruda's comic for TSQ. I deeply value his creative, humoristic, and necessary work. It was a learning experience for me to engage with the ethical responsibilities, but also creative and scholarly potential of translating trans and travesti writings. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you to you for your labor.
Pueden hablar en español. I think we can be both. Someone can chime in and translate. I'm, Chicano, so my Spanish is pocho Spanish, pero intento. I'll try.
So for me, it was amazing experience also, and I thank you, Professor Kowalski, because it was just amazing. I had the experience of translating before. However, it had never been any trans or queer studies pieces, and it was such a different experience because I started to understand how really translation is as a form of creative close reading, where you're also creating new ways of knowledge across languages. And so it was interesting to see how sometimes in the piece that I was translating, which was by Professor Bernardine Hernandez, the concepts like brownness are really grounded in specific politics and also theories that don't always translate, or perhaps it's best not to translate, because it sort of loses the meaning or loses the intensity of it. So it was awesome to see how that process comes through, and also how to go and work around those sort of like more performative languages, forms of language in the translations, in a way that it felt like I was also sort of creating a new vocabulary for how to talk about queer studies, but in a different context. So I deeply appreciate it. It was a great learning experience, and I would love to continue this kind of work. Thank you.
I also would like to say I appreciate the chance, and it was like a really nice experience to have. Like, I also did some translations before, but never in a publishing kind of situation. I also wanted to like refer to what Professor Santana said before about the law and le problems, and like also what Winnie just said about terms like brownness. I had to translate transness and blackness, and ended up talking about lo negro y lo trans, which are not as close to the source term as I'd like to. Then the Kemia de Yemi piece talks at the beginning about pony girl, and I first translated pony girl as le pony girl, but then the piece immediately switches to the pony. And then I had to translate that as like I for some reason it felt more right to use del pony instead of le pony, because like it has a more of an emphasis in the animality of it. So there's a moment in this particular translation that like you kind of have to like decide between the human and the animal. And then it was I'm not sure I made the right choice there. And I've been thinking about it for months now. So this is a formative experience of sorts for me. I hope it was the right move. If it wasn't, well, yeah, I'll probably never find this form in this thing to translate in a translation again. So there's something.
I would just like to echo the sentiment of my colleagues and say thank you once as well for including us in this project. And one thing that I would like to add is that for us, it became a lot of collaborative and collective translation. We kept going back and forth and discussing how to translate certain topics. So I think in that sense, it also brought us together as a community.
Do any of our authors that are here want to chime in and talk about their essays? You see Cynthia, Malu, Lino is here too, and Lino, your piece is an illustration, so that adds a different layer as well.
Martín está acá también.
Yeah, I can speak if, yeah. Yeah, just thank you so much for the translation. It was really accurate. It was really, it was so interesting to see it translated from English to Spanish because the original piece is in Portuguese. So it just really like, it's been a while since I'd seen it. And just, it just feels closer in Spanish. It just feels closer to the original. To the kinds of experiences we have in Brazil. So yeah, that was just voicing how excited I am for this to be translated, because also people here in Brazil can start getting to know the journal. And I was really excited. I remember being really excited when this submission got accepted because it was during my PhD years, and you know, having something submitted and approved at TSQ was huge for me. And then also it being a graphic novel, like a little comic, that's where I put most of my effort. My most intellectual effort goes in the zines and these other like things that I do besides academic work. So to have that valued in such a interesting journal was it was really important for my PhD too, because I decided to make one of the chapters as a graphic novel, which is now coming out in English, Spanish, and Portuguese in July. So it was just a kind of step towards, yeah, you can do this. You can do theory through comics, you know, through other sources of creativity. So yeah, it's just thank you so much for the translation, for putting it online, making it accessible. Yeah, and I don't know if what kinds of challenges came up with the translations in this comic specifically, but I do play a lot with gendered language since the character is trans and there's a lot of confusion around how people are perceiving their gender. So if anybody wants to comment on that kind of challenges that they came across with the translations, I think it's a very exciting conversation to have. Thank you so much.
I could add to that because I was the one who translated, and I realized when I was reading that I was translating from English to Spanish, but the original was Portuguese. And I was like, oh, I wish I had the Portuguese version because that would be closer to the Spanish, and maybe there's something that I'm missing in this translation that it's already like far from the original. And I actually looked up the title of the song, and that really helped me with the title because the title was one of the most difficult parts to translate for me. So finding the song in Portuguese and then translating that in Spanish was really helpful. And yeah, but thank you so much for reading and writing. And I really enjoyed translating it, and I had fun, something that it's difficult to have while doing your PhD in the first year. So this was very meaningful work for me.
Lino, can you drop the title into the chat for us all so we can, and the press if you have that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy to share too. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. I want to, first of all, maybe just go back to what maybe Daniel was saying about how he's feeling uneasy about word choice. And also back to what Professor Santana was saying about the distance and the space you take and the time between having written it, having it been published, and then returning to it to work on it as a translation. And it's just making me think a lot about the temporality of translation in terms of, I'm just thinking like, you know, Fano and all these other people have been translated multiple times by multiple people, and depending on the moment it's translated in a certain way to speak to whatever that specific time is doing or saying, right? And so like maybe to give you some ease or something, Daniel, that maybe you didn't choose right, but maybe there's no right or wrong, right? Maybe it's always in conversation, which is what I think is what translation, or what I've realized in my own translating of my own piece, how difficult and how ongoing it actually is, because it's an intimate process with words and with thinking and with concepts and with bodies. I think translation's not just discourse. And I don't know. And so it made me think about, like, for example, one of the things that I wrote about with Leah's beautiful work is trying to conceptualize what she's doing, right? And calling it to transgender touch. And when you try to translate a verb that in English works as a verb, but in Spanish maybe it doesn't, how do you think about that? And how do you honor also work that is being done in Mexico with its own languages and try to conceptualize with the work in that language? And so that, I mean, the way I worked with that is that if you read the Spanish, it's a little bit different than the one in English in the part of the transgendering touch version, because then I decided to think about it through transtocar as a verb, and what does it mean to think about trastocar, and adding the N, turning it into transtocar, rather than this kind of composite to transgender touch, which works in English, but maybe doesn't work in Spanish. I also don't know if it works. I'm not sure. It's all a test and it's all trying it out. So it's all like, it's a little bit of drag, isn't it? To try put these languages on what you're thinking. So I don't know. Thank you, everybody, because it is a conversation and I'm so excited that it's in Spanish. It's so important to me as a person from Mexico who works with Mexican artists. And the fact that I'm writing in English and sometimes they can't read what I write breaks my heart. And so I feel a bit like a traitor or some kind of ambivalent feelings that arise. So something like this is super important, imperfect as it is, that they have access to this, that I have access to it, and that everybody can think together across like languages and across geographical borders. So thank you so much, Cole and Juana and Claudia, Sofia and Francisco, and everybody. Everybody's already said all the names. So I'll just echo the repeating, but thank you so much.
Anyone else? I mean, Tanya, this is the first. Oh, go ahead, Malu, and then I'm going to prompt Tanya to.
Yeah, this is amazing, by the way. I'm just so happy to be in community with everybody because I mean, I've not met a lot of people. So meeting you all virtually feels a little bit closer, I guess, in this time. I'm so thankful for this. I didn't know it was happening. It was being translated. So it's a surprise, a very like happy surprise. And I think to reiterate something that everybody else has already said, it's so important to me that it's in Spanish and that it's like easily accessible with a link that I can send everybody. That's amazing. I already tweeted it out. I don't know if that's okay, but I already did it. Yeah, I think it's amazing. I'm so happy. I came up with a lot of issues with translation in my text, particularly, and when I got my revise and resubmit, I remember sitting with my advisor like, there's certain things here that I don't want to translate, that I don't think I can translate. So now I need to write something to justify why I'm not gonna translate this actually, and why it's part of my political praxis and part of my theorizing not to do so. And so that was, and also to have Juana Maria helping me edit, and all of those comments I feel like made my writing so much better, but also kind of standing with me, and even in little things like my name being put the way that I wanted it to be, and all of the things. So it's truly been an amazing experience. And also for me, the commentary I received from the reviewers, who I don't know who they were, but I remember like the way that their critique has moved my work forward and has helped me envision kind of something that they said was like, oh, your text, it's a little bit of, you have an academic voice sometimes, and sometimes this like queer, like cabra voice, like you're just talking, and why don't you separate the two more? And I was like, no, this is my voice, this is how I want it to be. But I kind of decided when I submitted it that the essay needed a follow-up, and that in this follow-up, I would try to do these two voices. So I have a follow-up essay hopefully coming up soon that has exactly what the gift that this critique gave me. And so it's already pushed me to think in so many new ways. And I'm so thankful for this opportunity, especially because for me, it was my first academic piece being published as a graduate student in my master's degree. And so that was huge. I'm so thankful to you, Manuel. I think you translated my work, and I would be super excited to hear what things came up for you during that. I think a lot of it was already in Spanish, but it's interesting because different things mean, so like cabra or marica, it's not the same in Peru as it is in Colombia, as it's in Chile, in Cuba. So like I find that super interesting as well. So thank you for this amazing gift, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
So I was prompting Tanya, our editorial assistant, a little bit because this is the first like items to do that she had to work on. First thing she had to work on when she took the job as editorial assistant for TSQ, and her trilingual abilities is, you know, one of the reasons why she was so competitive in terms of applicants for this position, because in TSQ, you know, we're doing a Europe issue. We are, like, you know, interfacing with folks who are, you know, multilingual. And so I found Tanya to be really competitive, and Tanya did do some line edits for me just to make sure that everything was ready to go, because I don't have that capacity or ability. But Tanya, I don't know if you wanted to speak a little bit, and you also now have merged into handling more of the back end work of the journal, and so, you know, you really are the one that keeps things moving in terms of the production process and everything.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos, todes. Thank you for having me. I was very honored to work on this issue for so many reasons. First of all, because as I've progressed in my academic career, I realize how tremendously provincial in many ways scholarly journals in the US are in linguistic terms, in terms of accepting scholarship and giving scholarship from around the world its rightful place. And I feel that TSQ is one of the few journals out there to do that. And that's why this particular issue of Trans en las Américas is so historical, precisely because it's being given that rightful place in Spanish nonetheless, which I realize unfortunately is very rare. So I was honored to put in some labor in helping that task of unprovincializing American scholarship, opening it up to the world. And as I was proofreading some of these brilliant essays and translations, I also came across a lot of these linguistic issues that when I was looking up inclusive language in Spanish, I first found that I, as a native Spanish speaker, was fighting first against myself and what I internalized as incredibly gendered language. That was the first barrier, right? And then trying to use inclusive languages as accurately as possible, but respecting also the play on gender language that some of the authors were doing. That was very challenging. And what I had as tools to use were not very helpful, to be honest, because you go to language forums, especially Real Academia de la Lengua, and then you realize it's horribly colonialist in their approach to language. And that's still, it's expected in some ways, right? As someone who engages with decolonial scholarship, to run into those attitudes, but it's heartbreaking nonetheless. It's heartbreaking nonetheless in terms of the resistance that there is to change and to inclusivity. And they even have a statement that they put out against using inclusive language. And the more I researched, the more I realized that this is going to be a battle to be carried on to open up languages, literature as well, to inclusivity and diversity in meaningful ways. I also wanted to be consider the beauty of the language. Like, for instance, one of the articles that I proofread was Mais Viva, and why was it important to keep that viva, right? What it meant emotionally, what it meant politically, and then use as much the e and the x as appropriate. So it was an exercise in decolonizing language, also and also challenging gendered language as much as it was editorial work. So I'm very grateful to have had an opportunity for that. Thank you.
We want to hear from any of the other authors, or do folks have any questions who are not our authors or translators about the issue? Or we can take this a variety of ways. I will say that it was really important to me to format the essays as they appear as if Duke would have do them. So Duke didn't do the formatting, I did the formatting. I taught myself how to do that so that the page numbers would be in sync with what was printed for Duke for when people cite. And so that's why it took a little bit longer than it should have, just kind of doing the typesetting of it and everything. And so that's a skill set that TSQ has now. So, if there's other things that we can publish on TSQ now that are translations, I think it's a venue, and I invite folks who are not on this issue to, pitch some things and content in Spanish to kind of shake up our subscribers, because our subscribers to TSQ now and TSQ as a journal are mostly from the United States and from Europe. So, definitely translating text or, publishing things in Spanish, which is what we can do on TSQ now. We can't publish in Spanish for Duke in the journal, the print journal, but on TSQ now we can have that space. Martin?
Yes, I will speak in Spanish, please, because I feel more comfortable with this. Okay, thank you. De hecho, voy a hablar en español argentino. Yo quería agradecer muchísimo a Francisco y a Cole, y bueno, ahí, aunque justo lo estoy viendo como traductor, porque me parece que el TSQ hace de una tarea de hospitalidad académica que se necesita un montón en estos tiempos, y además pensaba que el número funciona muy bien para... como una caja de herramientas, como una política de los cuerpos trans para en los tiempos tan aciagos y necropolíticos que vivimos, sobre todo fundamentalmente en Brasil. Pero me parece que funciona eso, como uno podría ser como una especie de páramo en el desierto académico y político, y que súper agradezco. Y solo para contar un poco de mi texto y no ser un poco narcisista, me parece que hubo un trabajo de cuidado, y no sé cómo decirlo, de fraternidad en el trabajo que siempre me hizo sentir muy cómodo, y me parece que el texto es una intervención crítica. El texto, más bien dicho, el número especial me parece que funciona como un agenciamiento trans en un momento muy complicado. De hecho, el texto, las circunstancias de la escritura son muy raras, porque justo estaba en México pensando en Argentina. Hay como un diálogo ahí de muchos países, y bueno, y creo que la deriva del mismo número me ha llevado a seguir pensando cuestiones de necropolítica trans, y ahora me parece que un modo también de resistir es a través del trabajo de archivo, como está haciendo el archivo de la memoria trans, o tantos otros archivos que hay dando vueltas. Pero de nuevo quería agradecer a Francisco, a Cole, a Ian. Y lo último, que me quedé pensando en lo que dijo Dora hace un rato, que hay algo en la tarea de traducción que es lograr capturar algo que hace lo trans en la lengua, que es una política de la lengua, ¿no? Logra capturar algo de la variación trans en la lengua, que me parece que los traductores lo han logrado de un modo sumamente interesante. Eso, thank you very much for everyone.
All right. Do you have any questions?
I have a question. Can I go ahead? So hi, I am Larry LaFontaine. So I am not part of the issue, no participe, but I want to congratulate everyone for the original publication and for the publication of the translations. I have taught the issue once I should say read it with a student who was preparing for PhD exams with Carrie White. And on Monday, I am teaching it in a graduate seminar at the University of Michigan. But because we are a graduate seminar through the Romance languages, but because we are in pandemic, actually, the students who technically should be in Michigan, we're actually in Mexico, Argentina, Puerto Rico, Estados Unidos, like literally everywhere. So I'm very excited to be able to teach the issue in English and in Spanish. And I was just wondering if you have questions or advice or thoughts about what it means to teach this issue or to use this issue to think about trans en las Américas, like what brought you together and what has motivated you to make it available in English as much as in Spanish. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, that's a big question. I might need a moment to think about it. Juana.
No, I mean, my lag is awful. I think one of the things that the issue does is in language, we see the diverse ways that trans is expressed in language, in local. So I think that connection between the local and the global and how that's differently accented in terms really sort of emerges, that we were not trying to sort of come up with a single vision of trans in Las Americas, but quite the opposite, to really highlight all of those questions, because even the questions of translation, I think, are different in where the piece originated, and who the original authors were. So I think that diversity of perspective of language was part of our intention, and I think that really is clear.
Absolutely. Some of what I appreciate so much is partially what Martín has mentioned, which is the shift in trans necropolitics that happens in the issue. I think that those conversations have to some degree been overdetermined by US and European modes of study. And I think that the turn to the hemisphere provides us another way of looking at trans necropolitics that draws attention to diverse state formations, whether it's modes of neopopulism, contemporary genocide, historical genocide. That to me feels really powerful, and to be able to make that critical move. Some of what I also appreciate is the intersection of politics and aesthetics that we see throughout the issue, the insistence on embodied modes of care, vulnerability, resistance. Again, just as Juana Maria has said, we weren't trying to create sort of a coverage model of this is trans studies in Las Americas, but to ask instead, what are maybe some thematic concerns that emerge across these essays? And it really did emerge from the body of work that we received. These sort of, we found as we were receiving these submissions, these sort of thematic linkages across the issue. And that was really exciting too, just to take the pulse and see, okay, what do people think that trans studies in Las Americas is at this juncture, at this historical juncture? And that was a very powerful thing. And I mean, a number of us are folks who are working in trans studies in Las Americas in this Zoom room right now. And I would be really curious. I don't know, I've been wanting ever since this issue to create a network or do something bigger that's about, how can we connect ourselves as scholars who are trans Latinx Latin American studies folks doing the work. Can we come together? Is there an edited volume, that Duke Press needs to do on queer, trans, Latinx, travesti, Latinx Latin American studies? Is there, do we need a bigger network, some sort of conference? I would really be excited to do that with you all. I see many of you here who are trans and queer Latin American studies and Latinx studies scholars. So just throwing that out there, that would be great to do something with you all. I'm always game for the collective process. So throwing it out there that I would like to do that. Because I think it's an evolving question, right? I mean, we're in a moment where, US trans studies has this recent turn to historical materialism. And I was struck when I was reading a recent social text roundtable that came out in December 2020, where a number of major trans studies scholars weighed in, and asked what happens, this is a quote from Erin Azura's introduction, quote, what happens to the sex of transsexual when it becomes transgender? Is sex a site of world building for trans politics or thinking now? And Azura goes on to ask, or goes on to say, trans studies, in Azura's words, is conditioned by the fact that access to hormones and surgery literally has demanded rejecting sexual pleasure. And yet statements like this can only be true in the context of the US-based trans studies that's over-determined in some ways by US American studies. Because when we're thinking about Latin American, Caribbean, Latinx trans studies, there's always already an attention and to the relationships between capitalism and sex and the work that sex performs as sex work, but also sexual labor as central axes of analyses. So there's just these moments where I read trans studies work, and I'm always, coming out of US-based trans studies, I'm struck by, these moments where I feel like we need more work. This turn isn't recent. It's actually, it is the ground in some ways for doing travesti or travesti theory in the Americas and thinking about transness and travesti embodiment. And I mean, the things like this, just as an example, as a single example, but there are many.
No sé si
Thanks for
puedo
the question,
agregar
Larry.
algo.
That's great.
Can I? Besides that, I'm not an editor, but I think that voy a hablar en español, me siento más. Bueno, gracias. Creo que Larry, hay como dos cosas que se me ocurren que funcionan muchísimo en este número. Una tiene que ver con una gran capacidad de pensar las singularidades, diría como geográficas corporales de esa gran cosa que se llama las Américas. Me parece que es pura localidad y pura singularidad de los cuerpos en situación, y eso se nota muchísimo en los textos. Y otra cosa que me parece que es un gran aporte para pensar este número es, hay algo así como un gran desplazamiento de escenarios hacia gramáticas emocionales súper interesantes, que es algo que me parece que está trabajando ahora Cole y yo algo estoy haciendo pero en el número se nota, hay textos sobre el duelo, para pensar la rabia, para pensar la furia. Me parece que eso también son como desplazamientos tectónicos semiótico-corporales que están en el número para trabajar un montón.
Gracias.
Larry, in reading the issue and in thinking about teaching this in your graduate seminar, do you have thoughts, questions that have come up for you as you're rereading the issue and looking at it again through the lens of teaching it in a seminar versus working with a student on exam preparation? I'm curious to hear more about how the issue is circulated in general. So Larry, if you want to weigh in, if others would like to weigh in about if you're teaching or using the work in different ways, I'm really curious to hear what the reception has been like and how it's circulated.
So I think that the issue is extraordinary and does a lot, but it is impossible to do everything. So for example, one of the things that Carrie White identified that we wanted to expand was the issue of Blackness. And indigeneity. So for example, I am teaching the issue on Monday, but we added some articles. So we added PJ Di Pietro, for example, as a way to continue to expand, to continue to move, and to put it to precisely to do what you say, which is to envision the articles in this issue, but also in conversation with other people and what other people are doing and continue to do. But I think it's just so exciting, y especialmente ahora que está en español, también toda la cuestión de la traducción, porque muchas veces precisamente ese es el problema, pensar cómo se dicen estas cosas en español o cómo las dijeron en español y las tuvimos que leer en inglés. Entonces creo que eso va a ser un ejercicio bien interesante. I don't know if I can read everything in Spanish by Monday para tratar de comparar las dos versiones, pero el tema de la traducción es absolutamente central para entender la experiencia trans y queer latinoamericana y caribeña. Entonces creo que esta conversación y su publicación es bien valiosa en ese sentido.
have any other questions or comments?
What do you all think that trans studies in Las Americas is right now? I mean, what feels alive to you? What feels central to you? I mean, the times are so different, right? When I'm sorry that Claudia's internet looks like is unstable. I see her dropping in and out, but I just want to say that, you know, Claudia and I started working on this 5 years ago. I mean, when we started this, it was in 2016. Actually, it was in 2015 because we were proposing to go to a conference. We organized 4 panels along with Adela Massa, Perez de Mayo, Alba Pontrabasa. The 4 of us organized 4 separate panels at Trans Studies International Symposium at University of Arizona. And that was then the conference itself was in 2016, but that meant we were working towards organizing these panels in 2015. So it's been 6 years. And then from there, of course, we asked Juana Maria, and she generously accepted, as did Danielson Lopez, to work with us on the issue. But we were, and Juana mentioned, you know, we were both graduate students, Claudia and I. So this issue really was so formative for both of us at that time, and I think for all of us, hopefully. But it's, you know, it's really, so it's been, I guess what I'm saying is it's been 6 years since we started thinking about this. And I'm really curious to hear from other people. You know, it came out in 2019, but obviously it's such a different moment that we're living in right now for so many reasons. So I'm curious to hear from folks who are here, what you think that Trans Studies in Las Americas might look like now for you and your scholarship, or for others.
Emmy, I did see that you were about to speak. So do you want to chime in?
I was going to say something that kind of tied on to what Larry was sharing, and also a previous question that Cole shared. So we don't have to kind of retroactively go back and revisit that. I think that what Cole has asked is a really interesting question, but if there is time, I'm happy to share. I don't know if folks would rather answer the question that Cole had already posed for the group. Otherwise, I'm happy to go on. Go for it. All right. Well, for me, this issue was really groundbreaking in my own way of how it kind of pushed me through the umbral of thinking about a lot of this subject matter. But I also, in addition to thanking all of you for all the work that you did and putting a lot of the thoughts that I had been thinking about for a lot of time, and I couldn't describe them by any means the way that all of you did, pushing me theoretically and thinking about applying it to authorship, because I specifically work with a lot of travesti authors in Argentina. So getting to utilize all of that scholarship and thinking about it more critically, you gave me a lot of tools to move forward and really build on my own work. But additionally, kind of tying off of what Larry was saying, I taught a course where I was able to use your articles and also give students a way of thinking about things that didn't filter their knowledge through the global north. So to specifically apply a lot of the things that Martin was talking about, that Malu had discussed, and to give them those articles and give them sort of strategies to think about how these things exist in other parts of the globe that are beyond their own understanding and their own theoretical grounding, that they can kind of put them into parallel without conflating the two. It was super, super powerful to be able to give them the tools to think about it harder. And now I'm really excited to juxtapose the things that have been done in the first edition and be able to apply that to Spanish as well. So I'm super stoked to read it in Spanish and be able to think about a lot of the things that I have been wondering in terms of some of the direct refusals of translation that I know that Malu talks quite a bit, and I love that. And I think that's also something that I really pushed with my students to say sometimes, no, don't translate it. It's more powerful to talk about it in essence as it is. So to have those tools and those strategies and to be able to give it to a new group of students that are just kind of commencing that sort of gateway, even as undergraduates, in terms of expanding the different regions of the world and how they're thinking about them, I think was really powerful. So that's what I have to add. I'm super excited to read the translations, and also thank you for letting me join you for your chat about how you processed all that information as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I think we're hitting at like folks' bandwidth for, you know, Zoom. So I want to do a call for final thoughts or final observations before we all go on and enjoy our Friday afternoons. But I do really want to reiterate that TSQ now is definitely a space to do the work in Spanish. If folks want to take it over as a platform, I'm happy to give that platform. So I just want to remind folks, like, just send me an email and we can work together on whatever you might need. And Cole is taking over as the translation section editor as our reoccurring section. So, I mean, he's available to, I'm making you available to to work with folks on, you know, thinking through translation in the journal and the print journal. So I just really want to thank everyone and let any other final kind of comments happen, and then we can, you know, have a good Friday afternoon.
Keep writing, and we'll find ways to keep reading and publishing and translating. So yeah.
I would love to make a really brief comment about the translation section and some of the shifts in direction that I see coming. If nobody has an immediate comment or question to add. I also just want to say I see a number of trans studies scholars here who I know are doing this work, so I'm excited you're here. I see you. We're here together. This is great. And yeah, so some of the questions that the translation section previously has included work in translation, which I will continue to feature because it's incredibly important. And at the same time, I want the translation not only to include work in translation, but critical pieces that are thinking critically about the work of translation. So the work translation performs. Short pieces, 3,000 words or less. Some of the questions the section asks include: how does trans as a geopolitical knowledge formation travel, get received, reshaped, refused? What are the material conditions, circulation and translation of trans knowledge, cultural formations and political claims, political discourses? How do we analyze this circulation from its material conditions of inception, context of production, through to its movement and recombinations? What kind of counter practices or counter translations might we mobilize? I'm in general looking for work that's paying deep attention to transcultural, transregional, transnational flows of ideas, subjects, capital, resources, to ask how these are impacting the field of trans studies, its constitutive categories, critical vocabularies, institutional boundaries, disciplinary commitments, everything. So theoretical reflections are welcome, meditations on artistic, aesthetic practices, writing on activist projects that are changing how we conceive the work of translation in our fields. Everyone is welcome to submit work. So please, I invite you to think critically about the work translation performs. Those are the pieces that I'm looking for right now. And the section is kicking off under my editorial direction within the next month or so. So send me your pieces immediately, as soon as you can. I'm excited to receive them.